So today I want you to start by thinking about an exemplary elder in your life. Hopefully every one of us has known at least one. Maybe some of us have known a lot, especially those of us who've had the blessing of working in the field of aging. But I hope you can think of one. And I'm going to just invite Julie to call upon a few people to share what quality that person had, or what you got from that person. Okay, an exemplary elder in your life. If you would like to respond, you can do as Deborah Schweigart has done and raise your hand virtually or non-virtually, physically. So Deborah, I'm calling on you because I see your hand.
So my grandmother on my father's side was my person. And when I say my person, I don't just mean because she was older, but she was my person in every possible way, both as a young person when I came to live with her. When my mom had a really bad car accident, I was with her from about 6 months to a year while my grandma took care of me. In those days, if you had a really bad car accident, they kept you in the hospital for months. Not like it is now where they see you for 5 minutes and throw you out again. But
okay. So Deborah, just one word about that fabulous grandma who was your person.
She was my soulmate.
Soulmate. What a beautiful thing to find that could happen across generations. Okay, I'm going to call on Barb and then Susan, then Mariana.
Strength. It was my mother, and she gave me strength to get through many hard times.
Beautiful, Barb. Thank you so much. That's such a wonderful quality. Susan Schaefer.
Yes, hi. My person is my father. He had intellectual curiosity, started college in his mid-60s, and
Wow.
and graduated, he never went to high school, and graduated from Florida Atlantic University with a master's in history when he was 81.
Beautiful, Susan. Thank you for that quality of,
yes,
of curiosity.
And one other thing, family.
Family.
He would do anything for anyone of his family.
Beautiful. Let me call upon Mariana and then Rochelle. Mariana, are you there? Looks like she might have stepped away. So let's call on Rochelle. Marshall.
I'm an American that lives up in Toronto, Canada. And I'm a retired science and engineering person. And I'll be 75 in 10 days. But I'm very young at heart. I've been a single gal since I was 52. And I raised my kids. I took no nonsense from anybody. And I think the person to go to was a cousin from Israel called Rosemary. She died, but she was very loving and kind and artistic, and she just knew what to do and what to say.
Thank you, Mariana. Beautiful. She knew what to do and what to say. Boy, some of us could use that. Okay, now I'm calling on Rochelle Marshall.
Yes. My mother at 101 decided that she was finished. She was done. And hospice came and took her out of this home that she loved. And she was with it. She knew that when she was leaving her house, that she was never coming back. And I was very frightened at how she would react and what I could say to her as they wheeled her out into the ambulance that took her to hospice. And she looked at me and she said, "Another adventure."
Oh my goodness, how beautiful. What a thing at 100 to look at the last journey on this planet as an adventure. Thank you so much for that. Becky, and then Honey, and then Roz.
I hope my father will forgive me, but my father-in-law, he was a survivor. he was a survivor. And he was, he lived when everybody else died, and an amazing, happy, grateful man. And I sometimes don't see how he did it, but he was lovely. And he lived to be 93.
Beautiful. Becky, thank you for that introduction to somebody grateful and happy despite having gone through hell.
Yeah.
Honey,
I
couple
would
words about your elder.
I would like to bring up Jackie Mann, one of our synagogue members, very engaged. She was managing traffic for Hebrew school well into her 70s, because Hebrew school was the most important thing. And if the parents had a bad experience picking up their kids, God forbid, the child might not go to Hebrew school.
Oh, smart woman. Really understood how to look at the picture and make sure you count everybody who really counts.
Yes.
Roz Pelsiger?
Perfect. Most people can't say it. My mom was a very generous person financially, with her time. She was always helping people. She gave from the heart. She gave from the heart in anything that she did with or for people.
Generosity. So these, in Musar, in the study of refining our characters, we look at how to hone qualities that are positive qualities and how to diminish the ones that are not, or balance them at least. And these elders whom you all have described, and I know there are so many others who could have, but we've gotten a taste of so many wonderful qualities of caring and generosity and seeing what's really important and being able to be grateful and wanting to make meaning and be creative and be engaged intellectually. So those are wonderful examples, I think, of what it means to be an elder. So I'm going to share my screen to the handout so nobody has to be worried about not having it. Here it is. So we're going to explore some different takes on what does it mean to be an elder and how do we get there. So in the Midrash Rabbah, we have this beautiful quote. Would somebody like to unmute and read it? Rabbi Akiba said. First one to do it gets to do it.
I actually need to unmute you, so if you want to raise your virtual hand, volunteer. Susan.
It's a good thing I attend so many Zoom conferences. Boom. Rabbi Akiba said, Israel may be compared to a bird. Even as a bird is unable to fly without wings, so too are Israel unable to do anything without their elders.
Okay, so what do we get from this? Elders are not a group to be overlooked, but rather elders are an essential component of our community. And so much so that we can't actually flourish without elders. Now, this is a little countercultural, I think, to where we are in contemporary Western society, where the discourse, at least about elders, that is shot through with ageism, sees elders often as needy beings who demand or require resources, and sometimes consumers of resources that might have gone somewhere else. You may have seen years ago, the New Republic had a cover that talked about greedy geezers. And that's me and all my baby boomer contemporaries who are going to grow up and require so much of the society as we get older. But that kind of discourse, and people talk about the silver tsunami, that the aging of America is going to, or the aging of our Western society is going to be too much somehow and overwhelm the resources that are available. And what that kind of discourse misses is this idea that's here in the Midrash, which is that elders have at least the potential to not just embellish community, but really help community to be what it's meant to be, society to be what it's meant to be. So I think I mentioned in our first session, Dr. Bill Thomas, who was trained as a physician at Harvard Medical School, and in his first job became the medical director of a nursing home. And he has been pondering since then, how can we really address aging and elders in a proper way? So in his book, What Are Old People For? How Elders Will Change the World, he identifies 3 key roles of an elder. The first he calls peacemaker, but I want to suggest that maybe it's change agent. And I want to give you an example of what Bill Thomas is talking about, which is the group that Nelson Mandela formed of elder leaders from around the world, whom he dubbed the Elders. And he created this group on the occasion of his 89th birthday. And among the people who were in it were Mary Robinson, who had been the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, and Jimmy Carter, our own former president. And this was the mission that Mandela set out for himself and his peers. The elders can speak freely and boldly, working both publicly and behind the scenes. They will reach out to those who most need their help. They will support courage where there is fear, foster agreement where there is conflict, and inspire hope where there is despair. And Mandela imagined the elders intervening in places in the world where there was conflict, where there was civil war, and they did do some amazing work. I'm not sure if the group still exists, but that idea that elders are free to speak our minds is really interesting to me. The late Maggie Kuhn, who founded the Grey Panthers, used to say, "I have outlived most of my opposition," she said. And she resolved to do, did I tell you this? 1 outrageous thing a day for the rest of her life when she turned 85. And many of those outrageous things were political acts and acts of raising her voice because she just wasn't worried about what anybody thought at that point. So I always think about this, doing 1 outrageous thing a day. And I prescribe it for all of us as a wonderful thing to try to live up to. So the second role of an elder that Bill Thomas lays out is wisdom giver. And I think I mentioned in our first session that Bill Thomas imagines that culture is actually transmitted traditionally from the elders to children and youth over the head of the busy middle generation that's too busy doing to engage in that act of wisdom transmission. This fits really well with our tradition's teaching that the word for elder in Hebrew is zaken, Zayin Kuf Nun. And in the Midrash, Rabbi Yossi Hagalili says, a zaken is none other than Zeh Kana Chochma. It's an acronym, I think that's the right word, of the first letters of that phrase, Zeh, Z, Kana, K, Chochma. Oh, so Kana is Kan, Zaken, Zeh Kana Chochma. So the word Chochma is not actually in the acronym, but the acronym is elder equals one who has attained wisdom. And we know very well that not every old person is wise, but the rabbis say that this doesn't just apply to learned people. It applies to people who are unschooled, unlettered. And what the rabbis say about it is, you should rise before the gray-haired. Lifnei Seva Takum, it says in Leviticus. V'hadarta panei zaken, you should bring honor or glory to the face of the elder. They say you should rise not just before the one who's a scholar. You should rise before any elder. Why? Because you should see that person and you should say, how many adventures has that person had? Think of all the experiences they've had. They must have gained something from them. They must have some insight and wisdom that is worthy of honoring. And Bill Thomas says that elders can transmit wisdom, particularly through stories. He says, and I really like this, stories make the best wrapping for any gift of wisdom. Stories make the best wrapping for any gift of wisdom. And that's one of the things that people who are older really know how to do, is to tell stories and to put the nuggets of wisdom in those stories. And the third role of an elder is legacy creator. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. So legacy creator, what does this mean? It means leaving something behind for those who will come after. Barry Barkan is an elder care culture change crusader. You could say that for a nice Jewish boy. And in the nursing home that he created based on his vision, every day the residents would recite this definition of an elder. And I'm just going to read you a couple of sentences, but it's wonderful. You can look it up on the web. Definition of an elder. So among the things he says is, an elder's work is to synthesize wisdom from long life experience. Okay, we were talking about wisdom, and formulate this into a legacy for future generations. I'm going to read it again. An elder's work is to synthesize wisdom from long life experience and formulate this into a legacy for future generations. Okay, just want to say a couple things about this. This is not about whether you're a parent. A lot of times when people think about legacy and talk about legacy, they're thinking about passing on to one's biological children or grandchildren. This is not that. This is a legacy for future generations. And the important thing about that is that all of us have something to contribute. And it might be formulating a piece of wisdom and trying to figure out how to convey it, or it might be a piece of work we do. I don't know how many of you know a very, very famous story from the Talmud about Choni the circle maker. Choni the circle maker was a wonder worker. He could make rain come when it seemed like that was impossible when in times of drought. But at some point, Choni, when he was 70 years old, decided to plant trees by the side of the road. And while he was planting these trees, a stranger pulled up alongside him in their donkey or camel or whatever and said, "Hey, you old man, how long is it going to take for these trees you're planting?" It was a carob tree. Thank you, Sarah. I had a mind freeze for a moment there. How long does it take for this carob tree to reach maturity? You think you're going to live long enough to harvest the fruit of this tree? And Choni said, "I think it takes about 70 years. And the man said, "Well, how old are you?" And Choni said, "I'm 70 years old." The man said, "You seriously, why do you care? You're not going to be around 70 years from now." And Choni said, "I received a fruitful world from my forebears. And as they planted so that there would be a fruitful world for me, so too am I planting for those who come after me." That's a really fundamental teaching about leaving a legacy that isn't about inheritance by one's direct descendants, but about the work we do to create a world that will be sustainable for those who come after us. Okay, so those are 3 tasks of an elder. Again, they are, I'm going to say, change agent, wisdom giver, and legacy creator. Now I wanted to turn, just going to see what Geneva said. Geneva said, well, I think those of us who are still working have an awkward experience. While some of us may not be that great with technology, we do know how to navigate the politics of the workplace and how to get the best from coworkers and clients. When we are marginalized, all of our personal experiences are lost. Yes, it's a really delicate thing. How do we make room for those who are coming up behind us and not lose the wisdom of those who have aged into their roles? Okay, let's go back to sharing screen. Okay, I'm going to share with you this amazing text that is not just wisdom for growing older, but it's framed as wisdom for growing older, but it's really wisdom for everybody all the time. So, this text is an interpretation of a verse from Genesis by the Slonomer Rebbe. The Slonomer Rebbe was a Hasidic rabbi who emigrated from Poland to what was then Palestine before World War II. And he lived until, I think, 2001, something like that. So he wrote in the world that we know. And although he doesn't refer directly to the Holocaust in Israel, there's a sense kind of hanging in the penumbra of what he writes that he knows our world. And he also writes in a very beautiful, accessible Hebrew. And the Slonomer is always interested in what is the Torah teaching, no matter what it's talking about, that could really help us to live a better life. And that's why he's my personal favorite Rebbe. So, excuse me, his Torah commentary is called Nitivot Shalom, which means pathways of peace. And this is an abridged version of his comment on the line, Abraham was old, come of age, and God blessed Abraham with everything. So first, just a word about how rabbis read text. It's kind of an assumption that everything in the text has meaning. So if we come upon a text that seems to have something that is redundant, we have to know that it's there to teach us something different. So if we say Abraham is old, why did we have to say he came into his days, or he came of days, or he came of age? Don't those two things seem like they might be redundant? So the Slonomer Rebbe is going to tell us what we can learn from that seemingly superfluous phrase, Abraham came of age. Would somebody like to read the first 2 paragraphs? You have to raise your hand and then Julie can empower you. Betsy.
Excellent. Okay, hi. You want me to start in the Holy Book?
Yes.
Okay. In the Holy Book, Avodat Yisrael, Anavot 6:5, teaches that every Jew has a portion in Torah from birth, and every day a spark from that portion is illumined for us based on what it is that we need to repair l'taken that day. Every day has its own agenda, and it is written, give this that is fitting for a Jew to beware, lest a single day will be passed in vain, lest we think that we could put off for another day what needs to be repaired. For that which is not repaired today cannot be repaired another day. Yesod HaOlam for chapter 4, verses 1 to 2, teaches in the name of Rabbi Isaac Gloria.
You think I have a typo there? He's
Just
really
wondering.
brilliant, but he wasn't Rabbi.
He's quite the rabbi. That no day and hour is identical to another, and thus no person since creation is identical to another. And one person cannot repair what another can repair. Thus every day has a purpose and a role for each individual.
Thank you, Becky. So, first thing that he says, every single day of our lives, there is some work of tikkun that is ours to do. Remember when we were talking about in the first session, the shattering of the vessels and the scattering of the light, and that the human task since creation is to try to rescue the light from the shards of the vessels and lift it up so it can be liberated and ultimately united and illumine the world and redeem the world. So that's the human task, tikkun ha'olam, repairing the world. But what the Slonimer says is, based on his grandfather, Avodat Yisrael, each of us has two things every day. One, our own piece of Torah. Each Jew has a portion of Torah from birth. And every day a spark of that portion is illumined based on what we need to repair that day. So we have a spark of Torah that we get every day and a task that we have, some piece of tikkun. So somebody else like to read the next two paragraphs, starting with based on this. Let's have somebody who hasn't read before. Marcia.
Based on this, we can interpret Hillel's saying, if not now, when? For every day is unique, and what is ours to repair on this day cannot be accomplished on another day. And Rabbi Levi Yitzhak of Bardichev wrote on the verse, see, I place before you today, Hayom, blessing. And the word Hayom, today, as the Holy One of blessing, continually renews in goodness each day of the work of creation in a special renewal for each day. So the Holy One gives every day its own new luminosity in Torah and divine service.
Beautiful. And want to do one more paragraph, Marcia?
As long as I can see it. The person who exerts themselves in serving God earns every day luminosity and new insight that they did not have yesterday. This is the meaning of, see, I place before you today, that is, the new and renewing luminosity of each day's Torah. Thus the sages say, every day should be as new in your eyes.
Thank you, Marcia. So just to note, the reward for dedicating ourselves to Avodat HaKodesh, holy service, for looking for opportunities to repair the world, is that we get new luminosity, new brightness from Torah, new lessons that we didn't have before. And I particularly love this. First of all, to say that the phrase that God renews every day the work of creation appears twice in a single blessing in the Shacharit, the morning service. And I just love this. Every day should be as new in your eyes. That is, you know, when we say the prayer, Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva, return us to you, God, and we will return. Chadesh Yameinu kekedem, renew our days as of old. It's a very kind of paradoxical wish, renew our days as of old, because it doesn't mean take us back there the way it was. It's renew. So that means that every day has to have something new in it. We have to be able to find something new, to glimpse or grasp something new that we didn't grasp before. Okay, so we have 2 more paragraphs. I'm going to invite one more person. I think Becky really wanted to read. We're here at This is the Meaning.
Yes. This is the meaning of Abraham's old come of days, that every day Abraham accomplished what was particular for that day and accomplished all of the special purposes and roles of that day. The explanation for God blessed Abraham with everything, which demonstrates the matter of abundance, Shifa, descending to this world from the worlds above, that the abundance descends only when someone is available to receive it. When there isn't someone to receive it, the abundance is halted and does not descend. This is the explanation for Abraham was old, come of days, that our father Abraham prepared a vessel to receive the abundance, and through this, God blessed him with everything, for he received the abundance each day.
Beautiful. Okay, so right here, this is the meaning of Abraham was old come of days. V'Avraham zaken ba b'yamim. Abraham came into his days. Every day, Abraham accomplished what was particular to accomplish for that day, all the special purposes and roles of that day. In other words, he found his work of tikkun to do for that day. And so really the translation for ba b'yamim would be something like Abraham fully inhabited each day. He fully realized the potential of each day. So it's not a synonym for Abraham was old. This is actually a comment according to the Slonemer about how did Abraham live his days. Not how many they were, but how did he live them? And the last part of this last paragraph about the Shefa is, I'm going to stop sharing for a second, a deeply Kabbalistic teaching. So according to the Kabbalah, God's abundant goodness exists in a supernal realm, but comes down to us through the Sfirot, through various kind of divine qualities or emanations that are present in the world. And the Slonemer says that the Shefa is always flowing, the abundance of goodness in this world is always flowing, but what? You can't go to a well and gather water unless you have a bucket, a vessel. So Abraham, based on the way that he lived, was able to receive the potential goodness that was awaiting him in every day. In other words, it's there in potentio, but he had to receive it. The Hebrew letters for Shefa, I will type in the chat, are Shin, Fe, Ayin. Oh, and Julie already, it's wonderful to have someone who's not only a Hebraist, but a scribe who can give us the Hebrew. Yes, thanks, Julie. So Shefa means to flow. It's abundance that flows. And a modern Hebrew word that comes from it is lahashpia, which means to influence. So we're being challenged by this text to think about how do we live every single day? And what does it mean to live intentionally and mindfully? So I have some questions for you about this because this is not so obvious. Okay, so the first question is, what does the Slonemer have to say about the meaning of time or the meaning of time in later life? What do we learn from this text about the meaning of time or the meaning of time in later life? If you have something to say on this topic, you can write it in the chat or you can raise your hand. Every day is a new opportunity. Geneva says, and live intentionally when we are ill and feel crappy. Yes. And you have to know that this person who wrote this text I am quite sure lived through a lot and no doubt left behind family that did not ever come to join him in the land of Israel. So he is writing this against a backdrop of suffering. Every day is important, Alan, absolutely. Mariana. Do you want to unmute yourself? Or Julie, do you want to unmute Mariana?
What it means is that, to me, you have to realize that, you know, how you spend your time is of the essence, because you're getting older, and do things that are meaningful in your life. And to me, what that means is helping someone who really needs help. You can feel it emotionally, not materially, but emotionally. People who don't know how to look after themselves, whether they are Jews or not Jews. And I do a lot of that. How to be good to people. But of course, you have to, there are limits too. And you still have to set your limits.
Right. And, you know, of course, thank you, Mariana. I just want to say that this text, this Slonimer refers to Hillel, who says, you know, if not now, when? But you know the other part of the teaching, right? If I'm not for myself, who will be for me?
For me, exactly.
If I'm only for myself, what will be for me? And then he says, okay, I just want to read some of these comments from the chat. Ronnie says, as long as the candle is burning, illuminate. Loretta says, life isn't over till it's over. Time is important as long as we live. Rena, it's an encouragement to live fully in the present and an opportunity to fulfill potential for good. Lynn says, my mother always said life is for the living, which I think can be interpreted in two ways. I'm guessing, Lynn, that what you're saying is that we might be alive, but not really alive. And in fact, the rabbis have a saying about this. They say that there are those who are dead when they're alive, and there are who are alive even when they're dead. So who's dead when they're alive? People who are wicked or who do evil deeds, because they're not really living their lives. And who's alive even when they're dead? People who've done good deeds, because their good deeds live on beyond them. Ronnie says it's not the quantity of time, but what you do with it. Right, that fits exactly with how this interpretation maps onto the biblical verse. When you make the most of each day becomes rich and full and time slows down. Live every day as a new beginning. Amanda says exactly where my mind was going, which was that verse from Psalm 90. Teach us to count our, teach us to number our days, that we may get ourselves a heart of wisdom. Teach us how to spend our days. That's a beautiful way to interpret, teach us to number our days. Amy says, being fully present in the moment. And I really am glad you said that, Amy, because this is not about busying ourselves. I want to make a really big lahavdil, distinction between this notion of fulfilling the illumination, the learning that's possible in the day, and finding the act of tikkun that there might be that's ours to do. That tikkun might be sometimes even within, like we were talking about last time, doing some sort of a repair on our own lives. It might be repairing our super busy minds and souls by allowing ourselves to be, just to be present, just to be quiet. Or it might be an activist piece of action of helping another, like Mariana was talking about. Nancy says, I'm mindful that I want to find people and things that fill my spirit versus deplete it. Yes. So that shefa, part of preparing the vessel for the shefa is knowing sort of where to turn to be filled up and where not to turn. I appreciate so much all these beautiful interpretations. Barry says this beautiful saying, I love this. Everyone has 2 lives. The second one begins the moment you realize you only have 1 life to live. Like that paradox. Nancy says she wants to hang out with little kids because they have so much to offer. They teach us so much about being. They really do. So that was one question. I have another question for you about this text. I'm very concerned about ableism. That we can say that aging is wonderful and worthwhile and doesn't have to be terrible and depressing and burdensome. That's all fine when you're well. And we already talked about what if your body is aching and calling for attention. But what if you're frail? What if you're physically frail? What if you're cognitively frail? Could this teaching speak to you as well? Let me hear from just 2 or 3 people who want to say something about that. Sarah says, a human being sharing a smile and thanks to another elevates the other and brings so much to our world. Sarah, exactly right. So nice to have you with us. Sarah, you're actually echoing something I heard Reb Zalman, Alav Shalom, say, which was, I once had him come to a conference where I interviewed him. And people said, this is great, Reb Zalman, you're talking about the possibility of becoming an elder, but what happens if you're dependent? What if you need other people to take care of you every moment of your day? And he said, well, then you have the potential to make their day, those caregivers, pleasant or miserable. Could be by, as Rabbi Sarah said, by a smile, or by graciously receiving, or by acknowledging the other, that you actually will ennoble them and uplift them and make their day. Ram Dass says, learn how to be joyfully dependent. Yes, and Ram Dass, the great Buddhist, formerly Jewish teacher, himself had a stroke and lived with extreme disability for quite a few years. So that's a beautiful answer, Sarah. Anybody else want to attempt an interpretation of how this text could speak to somebody who's cognitively or physically frail? Stumped ya. It's tough. This is really tough. I think maybe Sarah answered for all of us for now. So let's go on. I want to, those of you who download the source sheet can look at the other questions, but I want to move on to suggest a practice. I really think that what the Slonemer is talking about is this is how to live every day, but it's not going to just happen. It isn't going to just happen that we uncover what is the tikkun that is ours to do, or what is the piece of Torah that is ours to uncover today. I just have to look at what Ronnie said. She says, my seriously disabled husband taught Torah to his B'nai Mitzvah students until his final days. His efforts to teach were a lesson to his students. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so here's the practice that I want to suggest to you, and maybe I will share my screen so you can see it. In the morning, if we take just a moment to be intentional about our day, I would think that this probably has to happen before for me, it would have to happen before I climb out of bed, because after that I'll get too distracted. But what if I offered an intention saying, may I be open to the Torah that is mine to learn today, or the wisdom that is mine to learn today? And what if I said as an intention, may I seek opportunities to perform acts of tikkun or repair today? And then in the evening, what if I were to, maybe with my evening Shema, if I do that, or maybe just as an evening practice, saying, what did I learn today? Harvest. What is the illumination that came my way today? And what tikkun, if any, do I know that I accomplished today? So that's the practice that I want to suggest from this beautiful teaching of the Slonemer, is beginning the day with intention and then checking in with ourselves to harvest what the day has held. I want to say about the tikkun that we may not know we've performed the tikkun. I'm so sorry, I don't remember if I shared this with you all or not. Larry Kushner has this beautiful teaching. It's a poem called The Puzzle. And it's based on, did I teach this before, Julie? No. You can tell I've been teaching a lot lately, so forgive me. So in the book of Genesis, you remember that Joseph's father sent him out to check on his brothers who were shepherding the sheep. And Joseph goes out to find his brothers, and he meets a nameless guy. And this nameless guy says, "Where are you going?" He says, "Et achai ani mevakesh, I'm looking for my brothers." And the guy says, "They went that way. They went to Dotan." And Larry Kushner says that guy who said they went that way changed the whole course of Jewish history, because without that guy, Joseph wouldn't have found his brothers. He wouldn't have told them his dreams. They wouldn't have gotten mad at him. They wouldn't have sold him into slavery. He wouldn't have ended up in Potiphar's house. He wouldn't have ended up the number 2 person in saving Egypt from famine and saving his family from famine. And we wouldn't have been slaves, and we wouldn't have been liberated and therefore gotten the Torah. So that guy who said they went that way performed a tremendously important act that he had no idea. So Larry Kushner says all of us are that guy. All of us, it's like we were given, he says, when we were born, a puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle. But he says it's like the old days when they didn't put the thing in shrink wrap. So often you'd get your puzzle and you'd put the whole thing together and there was a piece missing. Larry Kushner says, yes, Joseph asked for directions, true. Unlike Moses, for example. So Larry Kushner says each one of us is given the puzzle piece of somebody that completes somebody else's puzzle. And we don't know who they are. We will never know who they were. And we will never know when we have contributed that piece. And they may not even know that it was we who contributed it. But that is a piece of tikkun that is ours to do. And I think that's really helpful in thinking about the tikkun that might be ours to do in a day. We might not know. It might have been some casual encounter we weren't even thinking about, but it could be really important. And I saw somebody had a question. Do I suggest using these daily questions for journaling? Rena, that depends on if you're the journaling type. Some of us are just better at reflecting, and if we had to write it down, that would make the whole thing not happen. So for some of us, it might just be taking a moment's pause to ask those questions. Anybody have a question or a comment before I do something to conclude? Yes, we need to leave room to, Julie says, we need to close the room before 4. Okay. So, Audrey says, as we age, we should remember we're still part of life's connections. Beautiful. Francine says that, yes, the individual decisions that our parents made influence who we are and the direction we took. Amy says, when you're a teacher, sometimes students come back years later and tell you something you did for them, which meant so much and which you totally forgot. I too have had that experience. It's quite amazing. So I just want to totally express my admiration and gratitude for all of you, because although not everybody got to talk, I feel your presence. I feel that you've been part of this exploration, and I really love the ways in which you've contributed to it. And I want to close with the blessing that I offered the first time. And somebody asked 1 or 2 times ago about the blessings, the songs. They are on my website, growingolder.net, under songs and blessings. So This is what I want to leave you with. May you see the blessing in all your days. Notice beauty and sweetness and be amazed. May you love without bound, ever feel God surround. May you mend and tend, may you learn without end. May you see the blessing, may you seize the blessing. May you be a blessing in all your days. How many adventures you've had on your way. Delights to be sure, also loss and dismay. Your vision has broadened, your heart opened wide. Your wisdom deserves to be prized. May you see the blessing in all your days. Notice beauty and sweetness and be amazed. May you love without bound, ever feel God surround. May you mend and tend, may you learn without end. May you see the blessing, may you seize the blessing. May you be a blessing in all your days. You know now what counts, with the rest you are through. You hold paradox and see gray, it is true. No more playing safe, from your core you'll not veer. Treasure this moment, it's dear. May you see the blessing in all your days. Notice beauty and sweetness and be amazed. May you love without bound, ever feel God surround. May you mend and tend, may you learn without end. May you see the blessing, may you seize the blessing. May you be a blessing in all your days. Thank you again, everybody. Shalom.